am here to tell you about my March wrap up. I know it's already like it's like still the first week of April, so I'm not too late, but I wanted to have this up last week, but school has just been so crazy. It has taken over my life again, so I haven't had time to film, but I'm gonna do it now. I'm also not wearing my glasses because the glare is just still too much, and Nyx is here to join us again. She's obsessed because I have the windows open, so she needs to be there right now. Excuse all the cars driving by and like my neighbors talking, but I want the windows open, so sorry. It's just too nice to have them shut. Anyway, I read 11 books in March. Some of them were my childhood rereads, and I started at kindergarten, so obviously like that's part of why I was able to read so many. March also wasn't a super busy school month. The first book that I finished in March was A Rogue of One's Own by Evie Dunmore, and I loved this. I read her first book, Bringing Down the Duke, last spring and loved it. I actually listened to it, but I had been seeing so many good things about it. I was like, I need to read that. So I did, and then when I saw that Book of the Month had her second book, A Rogue of One's Own, I was like, absolutely, sign me up. I want that one. So in this book, we follow Lucy, who is like kind of the leader of the suffragist movement in London. It's in like the late 1800s, judging by like the fashion and everything. So yeah, but she is like not your normal not Victorian, not your normal kind of like that borderline between Victorian and Regency era lady. She is in charge of the suffragist movement. Like, it's really historically accurate for a historical fiction romance. Like, I love that about this author. She really did her research, and it's so historically accurate as far as fashion and everything that they were fighting for. When a woman got married, she like lost all her property rights and everything was owned by her husband. So that is another reason why Lucy doesn't want to get married, because she wants to be her own person and she likes her independence, and she doesn't want someone to tell her what to do and when to do it, and she really enjoys having her own property and everything. So she grew up with the other main character, whose name is Tristan, and she loathes him. Like, this is enemies to lovers for sure. They hate each other. Well, at least she hates him, but he kind of hates her, but like he's always kind of had a crush on her. So as you can imagine, one thing leads to another. I really liked the ending. I didn't expect that ending, but I liked it. It was very tricky and I enjoyed it a lot. I won't say any more about the ending because I'll spoil it, but I was very pleased. Like, I was like, that is perfect for the way that Lucy wants to live. But it was really good. And there's a little black cat in it named Boudica, which is perfect because I also have a little black cat. But yes, you. But I love Lucy. She's so smart, and she has to like figure out how to get people to listen to her and help her with the movement. And part of that is her buying a publishing company and figuring out the best way to run it, and like figuring out a way to like kind of sneakily add in articles and things to support the suffragist movement without like just openly saying women should have the right to vote. Like, they're like doing it very sneakily so that husbands won't force their wives to quit subscribing to the magazine, which is so cool. And I'm excited. There is a third book coming out. I forget who we follow in that one, but I think the whole series is going to be following each of the ladies who are a part of this suffragist group. So the last one was Annabelle, this one was Lucy, and then the next book will follow one of their other friends who is involved in the movement. I gotta say, Catriona is my favorite, and I cannot wait for her book. Mostly because I like the the audiobook, the narrator's voice, and she does a really good accent for Catriona, and I just love it. So this is good. They're both good audiobooks, but they're both good physical books too. There are some steamy parts, but it's not smut. Like, there's a plot, which I enjoy. Sometimes I want something with a plot and a bit of romance. So I enjoyed that. The next one is a YA fantasy. This is another Melissa Albert book. This is The Night Country, which we follow Finch, who is the guy from the Hazelwood who helps Alice get to the hinterland. And he decides to like follow her to try to rescue her. Since there's a second book, I mean, you can probably conclude that he did save her. Or did he? But I really, really enjoy this. So in this book, we follow Finch more. So he's traveling through different worlds like the hinterland that are mostly like story worlds that like someone has made up, and then they just like start existing, which is really cool. But they're like different fairy tales. Like each world is a different fairy tale, and like it kind of gave me Starless Sea vibes because one of the worlds wasn't like just a giant library, so that reminded me a lot of the Starless Sea, and I wonder if that was kind of the inspiration. I would be interested to know. But I really, really enjoyed this book. It's so much, in fact, that like they kept mentioning more of the fairy tales from Alice's world, and go kitty. So I bought the book of fairy tales, and now I would love to own the Hazelwood and the Night Country, because both times I've gotten the other books from the library. But I really, really enjoyed this, and I liked the ending. I kind of suspected that the villain, like I suspected who that was like the whole time, but I think that's kind of the point, because like it's a fairy tale, like it's supposed to be a little bit predictable, I think. The next book that I finished was another romance. I was in a romance mood. It was Undercover Bromance. I know I read these out of order. I have Bromance Book Club from the library on my shelf right now, and I'm trying to get to that. But in this one, we follow Liv and Mac. Yeah, we follow Liv and Mac, or Braden Mac, but pretty much everybody calls him Mac. So he has kind of a rep for being like a player. Like he never has the same girlfriend for more than 2 or 3 months, and then he's on to like the next girl already. So he decides to like wine and dine the current girlfriend, but it goes horribly wrong, and Liv, the other main character, is involved somehow, and basically she ends up getting fired over it. Like, I'm not really giving anything away because that happens in like the first 20 pages, but she gets fired over it because the owner of the restaurant that she works at is just a horrible guy. Like, so he winds up firing her, and like she's mad at Mac. So yeah, and then Liv winds up noticing or like seeing something really disturbing with her boss and one of the other employees, and so she like tries to help get that other employee out because she is being sexually harassed, which is a huge topic to cover. And I love that the author covered that in a romance novel. Like, that's perfect. You should talk about that whenever possible. But they're like in the midst of this like kind of smutty romance, they're also tackling sexual harassment and like abuse, and like the fact that most abusive people in abusive relationships will go back time and time again. Like, it didn't have like a totally happy ending as far as that goes, but it was like a real world ending. Like, I was mad about it, but I was like, that is what happens. So I'm not really mad at the author for ending it that way. I'm just mad that that's what actually happens, which is so unfair. But I really liked this. Again, it was like, there were some steamy bits, but it was mostly like it had a plot, and like it definitely isn't smut, but if you just want like a really cute little romance, I highly suggest this. It is super funny. Like, I laughed out loud several times. And I can't wait to read the rest of the series. The next book that I read was The Postmistress by Sarah Blake. This reminded me so much of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I made a completely different video about that, so I will try to remember to add a card. I really enjoyed it. It is set during World War II, and it alternates between an American character in London and an American character or characters in America. And like the lady in London is a radio show host who is talking about what she's seeing during the London Blitz. Like, the people that she saw last week at the grocery store, and now they're gone. Like, no one knows what happened to them, or they do know and they're dead, and like all of that horrible stuff. Because at this point in the war, Americans still didn't believe that we were going to need to be involved. So her whole job revolved around making it very clear that London and France needed help. Like, London and France, Belgium, Switzerland, like all of those countries who didn't want the Germans to take over needed help. And that still wasn't clear to a lot of Americans. And like, when it started to become clear, a lot of people did enlist, but like a lot of people were still like praying that their sons like might have something wrong with them so that they couldn't go, which I kind of understand, but like, the war needs to end. So I really enjoyed that because it had all those different points of view. Like, one of the characters was a doctor who had been here in America in Massachusetts and had experienced the loss of a patient and decided to go help in the infirmaries in London during the Blitz, because he was like, I know what's happening over there and I want to go help because I couldn't help that person, but maybe I can help them. That kind of mentality. And so he leaves his wife at home and like writes to her every day, and like, yeah, it's just a lot. Like, you have to just read it, because I will ramble and ramble and ramble, but I really enjoyed this book. Like, you should definitely read it, especially if you like historical fiction, fiction set in World War II. If you enjoyed the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, or like the Tattooist of Auschwitz, like, you should totally read this. The next book that I finished was one that I read mostly in March, but so I'm gonna count it anyway, even though but this is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Like, I think you know this story. This is like the OG of romance, if you will. This is a Regency romance, so if you like Bridgerton, read this, because it was like the first one of the first romances, and it's not smutty at all because it was written during the Regency era, but it's really good. Mr. Dark. I did listen to it while I followed along. I will say that like the writing style does take quite a bit of brain power, but if you're up for it, totally go for it. I really enjoyed it. I like these kind of books because they make me think, because the language is so perfect. Like, we've gotten so lazy. Concludes my March wrap up, and I will see you again in my April TBR. So, see you soon. Bye.